Welcome to New York Got Game.
Welcome back to another edition of New York Got Game. Things are moving along in the season for the Knicks. They are just past the 10% mark of the season. 9 games played for the Knickerbockers. They're below 500. So some Knicks fans out there might be panicking just a little bit. So this episode, we're going to talk all about the Knickerbockers, and we have three guests here with us to talk about that. Should be a fun show as we're doing that for the first time. So let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it.
The Knicks are heating up.
All right, so one of the concerns surrounding the Knicks heading into the season was their lack of depth, and that depth was tested before the regular season started with injuries to Mitchell Robinson, Precious Achiuwa, and Landry Shamet. Now, Campaign, he's also been out of the lineup for a bit, and the starters, they've been logging heavy minutes. So let's talk about how this is impacting the team thus far. We're going to do it with Jarod Hector of True Hoop, who joins me now. Jarod, what's going on, man?
I'm doing well, Dex. How are you?
I'm doing good. Always like to talk to you about some nuance around basketball and a little bit of data, which we're going to do today. And you guys over at True Hoop, you did some analysis. You did some things looking at the Knicks bench minutes. And True Hoop's data also looked at the total minutes in this played by the 8th, 9th, and 10th players on each team. So how concerning is it when you looked at that data that the Knicks ranked last in those minutes for those players? And what does it suggest about their bench productivity?
Yeah, we started looking at this stuff, Dex, because early on we noticed a trend where it seems like a lot of teams are going 10, 11, 12 deep, which is kind of unusual in the NBA. And so we started to track this stuff and see, okay, is this just a couple games thing or a lot of teams do it? And it seems like a lot of teams are leading into this strategy. And you mentioned the Knicks injuries, so obviously that hurts them right now. And of course, Tibbs is a coach historically who is not known to go deep into his bench. So these injuries are forcing him to put more minutes on his starters. And early on, right, this part of the season, it may not matter. But if this continues and the rest of the league is going 10, 11, 12 deep, and Tibbs does not follow suit and go at least 8 or 9 deep, I think it's going to have long-term potential ramifications on a team looking at April, right, when we look at the postseason and things of that nature. So, yeah, that is concerning. And, yes, in terms of 8th and 9th and 10th ranked players, the Knicks are dead last in the combined minutes of those players. So that's got a little alarm bell going off.
Yeah, a little bit of an alarm bell going off. And so just to get more into the data of what you guys looked at, right? 9 teams in the NBA have 10 or more players averaging at least 12 minutes per game. The Knicks are not one of them, as you mentioned. So what advantages are those teams gaining that the Knicks might be missing here?
Well, obviously, for your main guys and your starters, it's less of a minutes total on their body, right? We just saw Philadelphia Sixers star Tyrese Maxey go down with a hamstring, and he led the league in minutes per game, right? That's no coincidence. The more minutes we play, the likelihood of injury increases, particularly these muscle injuries and non-contact injuries. We know the NBA schedule is packed and condensed. That's not going to go anywhere as much as we might like it to change. So teams that can figure out a way to lean into going 10, 11 deep obviously save the minutes load on their starters. The other piece of it is, Dexter, is that injuries are almost inevitable, right? Guys are going to get hurt, and coaches are going to have to figure out a way to figure out different lineups and put different guys in. But if you're already used to playing 10, 11 guys, when those guys are called upon, it's not going to be some new novel thing for them because they haven't played in, 3 months or whatever the case may be. So I think that's also a piece. And it also allows coaches to find out, hey, wait a minute, we have a hidden gem here on our bench and we can do something. Maybe we can play some minutes with this person here, this rookie here, this young second-year player here. And if that can turn into someone who can give you 5 to 7 minutes in the postseason, those 5 to 7 minutes could be huge.
Right, and that can be huge, right? Just finding out what you have on your bench, just getting little bits of information can be helpful for teams and coaching staff. So I know there's injuries, and we're going to get to the injuries in a second, but when you look at the minutes these Knicks starters are playing, how sustainable is it for the Knicks starters to keep up their heavy minutes load as the season progresses? What are some of the risks that will come with it? I know injuries are obviously one, but what are some of the risks that come with playing those heavy minutes?
I mean, you're just tiredness, right? So let's say they don't get injured, right? Look, we always see this thing when in the postseason, we always say, oh my God, it's because defenses get so tighter and everybody's, guarding every possession and all this. And it's like, yeah, that's some of it. But really what it is by the postseason, everyone's exhausted, right? So at the end, everybody's running on fumes and guys are just dog tired, right? And you see shooting percentages go down. All these different things that were happening that were doing well early in the season, all of a sudden start taking a dip. Yeah, some of it is you're all playing good teams and better defense, but a large part of it, again, is the overall wear and tear and grind of the season that has brought, that's increased the fatigue level and fatigue factor of these players. That's a huge part about that. And also, look, the Knicks last year, you could argue an injury here, injury there, they go to the conference finals. Right now, some of them were actually contact injuries, so that is what it is. But again, you had a guy, Alec Burks last year, who wasn't playing much, but then was forced to play come postseason, and turned out, man, maybe he should have been playing all along, giving us 5-7 minutes a night, because he actually performed well when he got in the games.
Yeah, and I think sometimes fans will push back on that, Jarod, and say those 5 to 7 minutes a night won't matter, but it can matter down the road, which is the point you make, just because of the information you get, the player's ability to stay ready, et cetera, et cetera. Now, we talked
I want to say something, add something right there, Dex, because you said it right there, 5 to 7 minutes, right? That is huge, because in the playoffs, you are trading possessions for points. That is the name of the game. This ain't the regular season. It's not a Tuesday game against the Detroit Pistons or the Washington Wizards where you're like, yeah, whatever, who cares? No. This is a series now. If I lose possessions, that is a problem, right? Because that means now my coach is going to say, we keep losing these possessions. Let me go back to my trusted guys and play them 40-something plus minutes a game. No, if you got a guy who can help you either maintain or even gain while your starters are resting, that is a huge advantage. And again, that's the little subtle nuances within the game that fans don't often see when they're watching.
Yeah, no. I love that. I love that you put it there, because I know fans will push back on that and ask whether it matters or not. And this is why we are having this discussion. So, injuries have limited the bench availability for the Knicks, right? It's forced Tom Thibodeau to be a little bit tighter his rotation, if you want to say that. So how much of the minute distribution issue can be attributed to this, the injuries that is, and how much is it that you attribute it to coaching decisions here?
Yeah, a large part of it is the injuries right now, right? You lost Hartenstein and didn't quite replace him. Like, I know you have Cat now, but you didn't really quite figure out how to do that. I know you drafted some young big, but he only played 3 minutes, I think, in his last game against the Milwaukee Bucks. So injuries are a factor. But again, you do have guys on your bench, right? Jericho Sims, who is getting more minutes now because he has to play. Landry Shamet, you mentioned, is injured. I also wonder, when everybody's healthy and Mitchell Robinson gets back and when Precious Achiuwa and all that, is Landry going to be part of the rotation? I mean, again, I'm going historically off of what Tibbs has done historically. And normally, he's 7, 8 is about what he likes to do. Can you push that up to 10, right? Like, again, those extra 2 players, a fan may not think anything of it. But if that buys Jaylen Brunson or Cat or OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, people who you think of as Iron Men, right? Yes, and we love that they can play all the time, but playing all the time isn't necessarily a great thing, right? Like, you want to have those guys performing at their best come postseason, because this team, as you know, Dexter, has designs on potentially winning a title.
Yeah, that is.
Or at least get to the conference finals.
At least, but the goal is to try to win a title, right? And that is the goal once they get to the postseason. When you talk about Tibbs and his rotations and how he plays, like last year, he did play 9 deep for most of the season. But are there particularly Knicks bench players who, in your opinion, should be seeing more time in the court, and what skills could they bring if given the opportunity? And when I say opportunity, just to be clear, Jarod, for you and the audience, I'm talking about even those 5 to 7 minutes that we were talking about earlier, right? That is a legit opportunity. So which players do you think could or should be getting those opportunities?
Well, right now, some of them are playing, right? Because, again, you have no choice because of the injury situation. So I like that. It's kind of good. So I hope what happens is when those guys come back, Tibbs sees enough that they're able to continue getting a few minutes a game. The big thing about young players is that they need playing time to develop, Dexter. Sitting on the bench is not going to help them, right? Watching the games, they need to get in there, make mistakes, and improve, right? And so Hokporty, who was I think you drafted him this past June, he got 3 minutes, I think, his last game. Look, I don't know if he's good or not, but I know 3 minutes once a week, it's not going to be enough to know, right? And I get it. He's going to make mistakes, going to lose possessions. Tibbs is going to be like, oh, I got to pull this guy out and get somebody else in there. That's his natural push. I get that, which means Sims may get more of those minutes, right, as the other center on the roster. But if you're seeing, wait a minute, Jericho can do some stuff. And then when Mitch gets back, you don't say, okay, Mitch and Cat and whatever, that's my rotation, and you forget about, well, wait a minute, Jericho Sims is pretty good. Let's keep him in the mix here, right? So when everybody's back healthy, I don't want Tibbs to go back to, okay, my starters are here again. Forget about you other guys. Like, no, you saw them do stuff. Let's keep seeing them do stuff.
Yeah, keep seeing those guys do stuff, see if they can get those opportunities and what goes on with that. Last thing for me, Jarod, on this. So a lot of fans are going to want to know this too. When fully healthy, right? When this team is fully healthy, if it gets to that point, what would you see as an ideal minute distribution for the Knicks, especially considering the contributions of Precious Achiuwa, Cameron Payne, and then even Mitchell Robinson, later on down the road, if he can come back, how would you like to see those minutes distributed?
I mean, ideally, and this is sort of like a rule of thumb, if you can have it on your roster, I don't want my starters averaging 36 plus minutes a game. Like, I just don't, right? Like, it's a lot. I prefer them to be in that 32 to 34 range if I can help it. Now, look, I get it, right? Like, that's difficult. And, you know, a lot of coaches don't like to do that. They want to keep their guys in and you know, Tibbs likes to, you know, what do you say, grind, and the game state calls for that, right? If you're down 10, Tibbs is going to be very reticent to stick to a rotation pattern that guarantees those minutes, right? He's probably going to pull somebody early off of their rest so they get back in the game so they can catch back up, right? And that's every coach fights with that. I get it. That's just the nature of coaching basketball. But I wish that he would say, okay, let me just ride this out. Because again, it's not just about the rest for your main guys and keeping their minutes low. It's giving those other guys the opportunity to learn from their mistakes and realize, okay, what am I messing up on, right? It's real-time practice, right? That's what a game is, because there's no practice in the NBA. These guys play every other night. So they have real-time feedback on, this is what I'm messing up in. And then, you know, timeouts, Tibbs and the other assistant coaches be like, hey, here's what we got to do on drop coverage. We need you to pinch it, right? That kind of reinforcement. The more and more they do that, again, you're not going to see this pay off in November. But if you keep at it, by January, February, it's like, wait a minute, so-and-so got it. I can trust him now for 5 minutes, and maybe in the playoffs he can play 5 minutes. Again, little things.
Yeah, little things. You know what you're saying there? Some people say the regular season matters. That's why you use that time to get this information for, you know, people out there to say it doesn't matter. That is my guy, Jarod Hector of True Hoop. They have some great analysis coming. They're going to look more into that data, obviously, as we get a larger sample size and move throughout the season, and we'll be able to take a look at how the minutes are affecting the Knicks. Are the bench players starting to get more minutes, particularly those players that are playing 8th, 9th, and 10th spots in the rotation? We'll see how that goes. Jarod, thanks for the time. Appreciate you joining me on New York Got Game.
Thank you.
The Knicks are heating up.
So many interesting things to talk about with the New York Knickerbockers this week, especially when you look at their last 4 games. So to talk about the Knicks, joining me is my guy from SNY, Ian Begley, Knicks insider, here on New York Got Game to talk about the Knicks. Ian, what's going on, man?
Dexter, how are you, man?
I'm doing good. But Ian, last 4 games for the Knicks, kind of interesting because you saw them lose back-to-back games to the Rockets and Hawks last week. Then they bounce back, dominate the Bucks at home, but then they lose to the Pacers in Naptown on Sunday. So what do you make of where this Knicks squad is right now with their record being at 4-5?
You know, I think they're getting a feel for each other, getting accustomed to each other. So there are some things you could point to and say, you know what, they should be able to work that out over time. Other things, though, like paint scoring, where some teams have been dominating the paint against the Knicks. That is something that it may just be a feature of this season, given the personnel. I think Karl-Anthony Towns has been fantastic on offense. The defense as a 5-man unit with those starters, I think they have some work to do there. And then Sunday in particular, Indiana, the Knicks basically played 6 guys. They played 7 guys. Tyler Coley played 2 minutes, but only 6 guys played more than 10 minutes. So that was one where maybe they needed to go a little deeper into the rotation to fight through any fatigue. And that comes down to also just guys being healthy. They need Achua back. They need Campaign back. And then you see what it looks like from there.
Yeah, you got to see what it looks like from there. And I was just talking with True Hoops, Jarod Hector, about this at that small amount of guys playing in the rotation, right, we're seeing right now in terms of the minutes. Just to follow up with you real quick on that, because you mentioned it, Ian, is that a concern of yours right now where you're seeing the starters play heavy rotation minutes, and is that something you're really keeping your eye on with this Knickerbocker team?
You know, I think you have to keep an eye on it in a big picture sense. I think it's kind of understandable, though, right now, given the rotation, given who's healthy, given who's out. But if everybody's healthy, right, if Fresh Achua is healthy, if, let's say, Landry Shamit's back on his team healthy, and then Campaign's healthy, if the minutes are still that high, then to me, maybe that's a reason for concern. But right now, given the injuries, I think you can kind of understand why these guys are playing as much as they are playing. That being said, I did think they could have gone deeper into their rotation Sunday against Indiana.
Yeah, would have liked to have seen that. Tyler Kolek only had 2 minutes. Jericho Sims with 9 in that contest. So small sample size, Ian, of 9 games with this team right now. But how do you think Knicks captain Jaylen Brunson is adjusting to his new teammates in the starting 5 thus far this season?
You know what? His shot has been there on some nights, hasn't been there on other nights. But I think generally he's played a pretty good floor game. You look at his assist to turnover ratio; it's been very good, very strong. And there are nights where I think he maybe was forcing the issue a little bit. But I do think that's been much less often than it has been him looking for a shot and also trying to get his teammates involved. So I think, Jaylen Brunson, he's done enough in a Knick uniform to have earned the benefit of the doubt here. 9 games in, I think he's still figuring things out. His teammates are still figuring things out. But over the course of the season, he's going to be just fine, particularly on offense. I think where you're looking is defensively, do they get enough stops to have success? The paint, do they get enough to control the paint enough to have success? And then the three-point shot. They've been games where they've gotten a lot of three-point shots up, but mostly they have not gotten a ton up. How do you generate more threes? I think those are the 3 things that you look at in general with this team.
Yeah, it's still a work in progress, and you just mentioned struggles on the defensive end. We've seen that lately. Defending the paint was an issue against Atlanta. Defending the 3 was problematic against the Pacers. How must the Knicks improve on defense? Is it just a matter, Ian, of time and chemistry? But what do you see that they need to do, and how do you think they get better to that point where they're much stronger on defense?
I'm not sure there's a lot you can do. I think, some of it is chemistry, timing, figuring each other out on defense. I think you're still seeing Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby figure out each other on that end of the floor. I asked OG about it Friday night. He said it just gets better every day. Early communication is key there. So I think you'll see those 2 continue to get more comfortable with each other. But, the personnel is the personnel. And so I think that there's a ceiling where you can go defensively, and there's going to be a lot of nights where if the Knicks win, they're winning based on their offense and just kind of outscoring people. Now, they have the talent to get stops when they need it, but I don't think you're going to see this team, finish top 5 defensively in terms of defensive rating just based on the personnel. And so we'll see what it looks like at the end of the year. But right now, it's certainly a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely is. Last thing for me, and you and I were just talking about this before we began recording this week. The Knicks, they open up NBA Cup play against the Sixers in Philly. Then they begin a 4-game homestand where they've got games this week against the Bulls, back-to-back games against the Nets at MSG. So what are you keeping your eye on with the Knicks this week?
Yeah, I think generally you want to see Karl Towns continue where he has been offensively, and you want to see, I think, some more scoring off the bench. But really, just getting the threes up, I think, is something to look at in a general sense. But you have to get some wins, right? You got to start stacking wins. And with the Philly team without Tyrese Maxey, with Joel Embiid, the first game of the season, maybe you can catch them there. You have a tough Brooklyn team. They've been playing really well in terms of their talent level. They've been fighting every night, so that's not going to be easy. Then you have Washington. But you would like to see, I think if you're a Knicks fan, this team starting to stack some wins, starting to play with some consistency, something that's eluded them through the first 9 games of this season.
Yep, consistency is a work in progress. Things we're hearing about the Knicks, and we will see if they can stack some wins this week. That is the great Ian Begley, Knicks and Nets insider for SNY, doing a fantastic job. Ian, appreciate you coming on New York Got Game, talking some Knickerbockers with me. I will see you soon, my friend.
That sounds good, Dex. Anytime, man. Take care.
The Knicks are heating up.
All right, finally this week, the Knicks begin their quest for the NBA Cup, a.k.a. the in-season tournament. And the first challenge in group play is the Philadelphia 76ers, who visit the Garden on Tuesday. Now, for the Sixers, it's been a turbulent start to the season for them, so let's preview Tuesday's NBA Cup matchup between the Atlantic Division rivals. And joining me to break it down is the lead voice of SB Nation's Liberty Ballers. My guy David Early is here with me. David, long time no see. How's it going?
Long time, because we got bounced in the first round last year, so there was no more to talk about. How you doing, man? Thanks for having me back.
I'm doing good. Glad to have you back. I think anytime we have a chance to do these previews, know the opponent, know the enemy, it's always a good thing. So glad to have the Knicks fans learn a little bit about what's going on with the Sixers. That's always good. So, David.
I feel like they know. I feel like they keep tabs. After the way the playoffs went, they got their eye on this.
You know what? You are right. The Knicks fans have been keeping tabs, but they want to go a little deeper. They always want to go a little deeper and find out a little more. So, David, the Sixers, as you know, I don't have to tell you, they've had a rough start to the season. What have been the main factors contributing to their struggles, and how much of this is related to the injuries that they've had?
The main factor takes us all the way back to the process and all those broken feet. It's injuries again here. I'm already having flashbacks of covering that Durant, Irving, Harden Nets team that was so good on paper, but they just never played together. You know, I'm not talking about the vaccine version. I'm talking about the first one with the hamstrings and the injuries. And with the mysterious situation going on with Joel, he played in the first round, he played in the Olympics, and he's not ready to go. Now you got Paul George. He's got a hyperextension and bone bruise. He's back. And now Tyrese Maxey's carrying the load without the two of them. No surprise, leading the league in minutes per game. Tim Bontemps on ESPN pointed out is also leading the league in air miles traveled. Trying to drop 40 every night, double overtime in Indiana. And guess what? He pulls a hamstring. So if anyone is surprised by that in Philadelphia and they're not shrugging, I don't know what shoulders are for.
Yeah, I also wouldn't sound like somebody from Philadelphia if that wasn't the case. I have some good friends from Philadelphia with Sixers fans, and they were down before the season. There was no optimism there, and I was a little shocked at that. And part of the reason for that was Joel Embiid and his injury situation. Now, he is expected to make his season debut against the Knicks on Tuesday. What can we expect from him, especially given the knee concerns with him and the team's handling of his injury management? So, Dave, what are your expectations for Joel Embiid if he makes his debut on Tuesday?
I went down this Reddit rabbit hole, and I was looking at, would it have been a 5-game suspension if not for this in-season tournament? Did they want him out there for that big ratings game against New York? It's not an ideal spot to play because as much as I think the New York Knicks have missed Isaiah Hartenstein, he was awesome in the playoffs, and he had such a good chemistry with Jaylen Brunson, didn't he? That pick and roll was lethal. But when Joel was covering him, he lived with the floaters and he could protect the rim. Now you got Karl Anthony Towns, and that's a whole other animal. And I think part of the reason Leon Rose probably went and sprung that deal is because he knows how much Joel struggles when he's guarding a Porzingis or Towns, and a guy who makes him come 30 feet away from the rim in that 1-5 pick and roll. And you want him to do that in his first game back, dealing with knee instability. And, you know, we watched Towns pump fake and get a few dunks against Milwaukee recently. He makes people look bad because of his jump shot. And so it's not a great spot. I don't know what they're going to do. Do you put Joel on Josh Hart and hope that he can roam a little bit more? Because it's a tough first game back, isn't it, matchup-wise?
No. I think that's actually a good point. It is a tough first game back because you're going to be really testing, as you're mentioning, Embiid's knee if he's playing against that 1-5 pick and roll. You could try to hide him on Josh Hart, but then that makes it interesting from the Knicks standpoint, Dave, that Josh Hart would have to let it fly and shoot those threes from deep because they may be there for him if you let Embiid roam and have a little bit more space. So I like what you're thinking there because a little chess match that could be going on.
That didn't work out for Philadelphia in the playoffs. Josh Hart looked like Ray Allen. So.
He did, including the big three that he hits in Game 6 to win the series. I want to mention a player that you mentioned just a bit before, and that's Tyrese Maxey, right? His hamstring injury, obviously tough setback for Philadelphia. How has the team's offensive rhythm been impacted by his absence? I know it's only been a few games, and who's stepping up in his place?
It was impacted when he was out there by himself without PG and Joel because he put on some bulk. He added a bag, but defenses could completely cue on him. And he's not the playmaker that James Harden was. He's not the playmaker that Jaylen Brunson is. He's more of that combo guard, Tony Parker-esque, go get yours, and he can drop 40, and he could be a menace. But in terms of getting the other guys going, you don't quite see him making a Caleb Martin or Kelly Oubre much better than they are. Without him, it's even uglier. I like Kyle Lowry. I like how he stepped up. We have seen Jared McCain, the rookie out of Duke, come in and play well and hit some big shots and looks like maybe he could contribute down the line here. They finally fired up Reggie Jackson a little bit in the last game because they were shorthanded. And, of course, you got Eric Gordon, who's a longtime Houston Rockets Daryl Morey connection guy. Any one of those could get hot, and I'm guessing to steal from some of your Giants parlance, they might go with the hot hand approach there to see who – you know, they did that with Campaign and Buddy Hield in the playoffs last year. But without Joel, Buddy didn't look very good. There's that cascading effect where instead of Mikal Bridges or OG on Paul George, now you put him on Maxey. You take Maxey out, and now you have better defenders on a guy like Martin. I still think there will be some lanes because the Knicks defense without Hartenstein is less predictable. It's not as consistent as it was last year. They probably do miss Mitchell Robinson a little bit more than people are talking about. But are Oubre and Martin going to hit those layups? They might need Andre Drummond and Yabusele to clean up for them.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see who steps up, especially now with Maxey out. Now, Paul George, other player who came back from injury, he's been back in the Sixers lineup for a few games now. What kind of impact do you expect him to have now, particularly with Maxey out and Embiid potentially limited because we do not know the role for Embiid? So what kind of impact do you think Paul George can show at this time?
I have high expectations for PG. I think probably there was some rust with that bone bruise hyperextension from the preseason, but, it'll be his fourth, fifth game back, and I think he's going to start to find his groove. You know that when one guy, a key teammate, is out, these stars take it upon themselves to deliver. PG is one of those guys who can, and so I think he'll have a good game. I think he'll be pretty tough to stop. Will it be enough with all the long, rangy defenders that the Knicks could throw at him between Hart, Bridges, and OG? That's tough because that's the perfect kind of trio to take turns slowing him down. But PG, I'm not terribly worried about it. I'm a little bit more concerned to see what Joel's knee looks like. I mean, the big question around here is he hurt or is he just not going to be healthy? And that's a question for Plato at this point.
Yeah, it is a big question around Joel Embiid. Now, speaking of Joel Embiid, you know this. I tried to stay away from the messy around Philadelphia because it's been a little messy around them for a while. But
that's not new.
That's not new. Yeah, you're like, we're used to this. I hear you. I hear you that we're used to this. But
Maury and Elton Brand joke. It's just Tuesday.
Just Tuesday. Just another day in Philadelphia. It's always sunny in Philadelphia. We'll say that.
That's true. That's true.
There we go. Now, Philadelphia, they were fined for public statements around Embiid's health. How has that situation affected the team internally, and do you feel the organization is handling his injury management well?
Oof, that's the million-dollar question, and the short answer is no. I believe it's difficult to put all the onus on Philadelphia 76ers as an organization because these issues are complicated. The player does have considerable say in what's released upon their own health. They're dealing with doctors, and you and I may not want certain pieces of information out there to the public ourselves. And Joel is known as, maybe a little bit sensitive to the fact he missed the first 2 full seasons of his career. There were leaks from The Athletic via Sam Amick, I believe, that some within the organization worry that he took some of that criticism that he was ducking Jokic in Denver a little too seriously. He listened to it a little too much. Is that why he pushed himself to play in Golden State? Maybe. I mean, the team was winning 1 out of every 3 games when he sat, and they were winning about 80% of the games when he played. So he also had a tremendous incentive to simply be out there. But was some of that for the noise, for the Kendrick Perkins of the world, for the Charles Barkley who's saying, you're not a steel worker, get out there, why can't you play back-to-backs? And not really understanding that this was a serious knee problem. And those of us who watch every single shot that he's ever taken in his career were on Twitter saying, I cannot believe Joel is in this game in Golden State after having missed a couple on this road trip because he's not right. And sure enough, Jonathan Kuminga fell on his leg in a game that was essentially over, and he shouldn't have played. So for the team, they would probably tell you it's tough. It's tough to navigate. I think they did expect him to be ready for the start of the season. But if you follow Joel, he's a game-time decision all the time. And I think he comes to them and says, I think I can go, but it is sore. Let me get out there and warm up. And then they realize, okay, it's not just sore, but it's a little unstable, which is one word that was reported. I forget who, could have been Shams Charania. So when you hear those words, you start to worry. You look at Paul George, he signed up to play with these MVPs, and Russell Westbrook That didn't work out. James Harden and Dame Lillard bounced him. He signs up to play with a Finals MVP and Kawhi, and he's always hurt. He signs up to play with another MVP and two-way player, and now Joel's hurt. When is he going to get to be the number 2 to that MVP that he wants to? And how do the Sixers handle all this stuff? I think they're happy to take some of these fines. If you really wanted to go down the conspiracy rabbit hole, you could say maybe they don't mind us wondering because people are buying those season tickets. Don't quote me on that part, but which half of the second of the back-to-back, 14 more to go that Joel's going to play in, and which one will he miss? I mean, these are questions for Plato also.
Yeah, no, it is. It's going to be very interesting to see how it unfolds when Joel plays, how much he plays, and then the biggest question that you have is how's he going to look when he's on the court, because his knees have not been good. Lower extremity injuries he's had throughout his career. It's been a rough one, right, Dave?
I don't want him on Towns. The way I'm watching Towns play, I don't want him trying to chase that guy because he's been a beast.
Yeah, I'm going to obviously we both will be watching this game on Tuesday, but I definitely will be texting you. I'm sure the first time they're matched up against each other and Towns has the ball, we'll know a lot. We'll know a lot from that. I'll say that. Last thing for me, Dave, when you look at this matchup on Tuesday with the Knicks, which Sixers players are likely to step up and play crucial roles, particularly if Embiid's minutes are limited in this one? Which players do you think really have to step up for the Sixers to get the dub?
You got to have one of Oubre or Martin play well. Which one it's going to be, I'm not sure. Oubre played some very, very good games at MSG last year, so it could be him. We know Nick Nurse really trusts Kyle Lowry. Played about 30 minutes the other night as we record this. So I do think that trust factor is there, and he'll be out there, and he's shooting very well from distance. Then does he go with a guy like Jared McCain? I think Yabusele has been out playing Andre Drummond to this point, and he is stretching the floor with some threes. Even if he's not making all of them, defenses are aware. We saw that in the Phoenix game. We saw that on that West Coast game with the 2 LA teams. Teams are at least aware of him, that he might shoot it, and he's a very, very big body. So for the Sixers to get that dub, Joel's going to have to look okay. I don't expect him to look as good as he did. You remember Game 3, he was a monster in the first round, and then he kind of load managed his way through the Olympics, which was unprecedented, I think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm expecting him to just kind of dust the rust off and just get a game under his belt and not really play too many minutes, not chase too many of those trap down blocks he's known for. It's going to have to be a well-rounded effort, and PG's going to have to be the man.
All right, we'll see how it all plays out as Joel Embiid likely to come back into the fold against the Knicks on Tuesday, first game of the NBA Cup for both teams. That is David Early, lead voice of SB Nation's Liberty Ballers. Check him out there. Does great work covering the Sixers. Dave, thanks for joining me on New York Got Game. Good to connect with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're welcome anytime. I hadn't seen you in a while. Good to talk to you. And we're hoping things get better in Philadelphia, just not when they play the Knicks. That's the only thing. But I hope things get better.
Better than New York football, at least. Whatever.
Ooh, shots there. It's a basketball show, and I don't root for any of those teams. So I have nothing to say on there. Thanks, Dave. Appreciate you, man. All right, we're going to put a bow on it for this episode of New York Got Game. As always, special thanks to my guests, Jarod Hector, Ian Begley, and David Early. We'll see what the Knickerbockers can do this week as they play on the road in Philly and then have a bunch of home games coming up after that. As always, thanks to the people that make this show possible. My director, Joe Masali, editor, Catherine Cooper, and producer, Brian Rakowski. For all of them, I'm Dexter Henry. We'll catch you next time on New York Got Game.
And thanks for watching New York Got Game. Boom shakalaka.